Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. Not only am I excited to bring you another edition of the show, but also another wonderful guest. Today's guest is Kim, who is the author of No One Believed Me. She is also someone who is a survivor, an advocate, has written a curriculum for others, and has done some wonderful things. So I am excited to learn more about her and her journey. I hope you are too. So tune in. It should be good.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events, who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Picks Global at www.hopeyxglobal.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another edition of the Miss Texas Show. As promised, we do have Kim Lakin Creger on the show, and I want to officially not only welcome you all to the show and, of course, to our guests, but also let you know more about our guests and all the wonderful things that they have done. And so, not only has Kim written the book No One Believed Me, but also there she was, not knowing if she should fight, freeze, or run away as fast as she could. She was 5 years old and had never been told about body safety or that she could say no. Somehow, this 8-year-old boy got in a closet or got her in a closet, pulled down her pants, and tried to get her to touch him. What is happening is what she thought to herself. She chose to flee and was running away. And a friend of hers actually, I say my friend, being abused by the other boy. I must not be mature enough, was her thoughts to herself. Reality was she was already groomed and being abused before this. That was my first introduction, her first introduction to sexual abuse, and it would unfortunately not be her last. One time, her mother even told her, "This is just what happens. Statistically, 1 in 10 children will be abused before their 18th birthday." She knew when she became a single mom at 19 years old that she wasn't going to let it just happen. She is now an instructor and facilitator for Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children. Stewards is a 2-hour curriculum for adults to help them to react, respond, and report. CSA is ever child sexual abuse if ever revealed to them. And so in essence, we all can and need to start watching out for our children, and together we can work to build a better, brighter future for all children. And so with that, we appreciate you so much, Kim, for taking the time, being on the show, and sharing with us. And so for our viewers, I was hoping you could just give us the opportunity to know more about you. Who are you? More about your journey, more about what led you here today, all of those wonderful things.
Great. Well, thank you, Melissa. I appreciate being here and just love being on shows and being able to speak out. And now, after 50 years that I've decided that I'm going to tell my story, I like to go out and tell my story because it does make a difference, I think, in people. Other people hearing your stories. I know that that's what inspired me to tell my story, was hearing other people's stories. And so, thank you. And right at this point in my life, and then we'll go backwards, I've had 3 kids and they are all grown, two boys and a girl. I said that completely wrong. 2 girls and a boy, that's who I have. And I have 5 grandchildren and 1 on the way. And so I just love to be able to, like I said, be out and educating adults on how to protect children against child abuse, and child sexual abuse specifically is kind of my my passion is to get, stop this pandemic from happening and this epidemic, because it's something that can be stopped. We just have to start talking about it more, and then we can make a difference. So how I came to this place, I guess, in my life, I was, I'm going to go back to, I was born to a 16-year-old mom and a 17-year-old dad, and they had just, gotten married. And then by the time my mom was 19, she had me, and she had my little brother on the way, and she was in the middle of getting a divorce. So she headed to Colorado, which is where I live now, and have lived since I was 3 years old, for the most part, and that's part of my story too. But when we moved here and my mom got divorced, she met a man, which would become my dad, and pretty much the only dad that I knew. I never knew my biological dad a whole lot. And so, that's already kind of a trauma in your life as a child that you don't realize is going on. I don't remember that a whole lot, but definitely it affected me. And then when my mom met my stepdad, I remember even at the young age of 3 or 4 that things were a lot different. And then when I was about 5, my brother was 3 or close to 3. We moved in with him, and that I remember being tremendously different than what I was living, because I had lived with my grandma up until that point. And so we kind of had that safety of a grandparent around all the time and everything. So when my mom and my stepdad moved in together and then later got married, we lived across the street from a family who I guess my mom and my dad had known from work. And they had actually known the parents of the little girl who I would become really good friends with, and who is in part of my story, who I talked about also being abused. And so I lived right across the street from her, and she was living with her aunt or uncle at that time. And we would go back and forth, to play at my house, and then we go play at her house. And her house had a basement, and that's where all of the kids basically always were in the basement. And so I would go over to her house, and I remember thinking at 5 years old that something was really strange, because the boys, and I called them teenage boys is what I called them at the time, were always walking around with their pants unzipped. And so, and things hanging out. And I was just like, this is strange, but maybe they just forgot. You don't know, because you've never been told anything different. And so, and also my parents were, because my mom was so young too, she was pretty open with me about everything from the time I can remember. And so, which I believe she overshared, but that I realized later on. And so maybe that's just the way their family was. And but then, as I said, there was one day specifically when I was playing with my friend, and her cousin had gotten me into the closet and tried to get me to touch him, and I didn't want to. I knew I didn't want to do it, and I didn't know what was happening, but I didn't want to be there. And so I ran out, and as I ran out of the closet and past another room, I saw my friend who had been taken by her other cousin and was being abused. And that's when the thought went through my head of, I must just not be mature enough to be able to be in this situation. My friend is a lot more mature than me. And looking back, as an adult, it just breaks my heart to think that was all that I could think of at the time, because I didn't have anything else to kind of measure that by, see that was all about, see what it was all about. So I never went back there at that point. So I didn't want to ever be there. And and later on, when I met up with my friend, we met, we haven't met in person, but we met on Facebook. And she remembered that specific incident, but she thought it was a dream in her mind. So she remembered that as a dream. And, you know, it just goes to show you how just really kids don't know. They just don't realize the reality of what is happening. And the reality of it also is not only was my friend being abused by her cousin, and then as well as her uncle that lived there. But it had been going on for a while, you know, it had been going on for a long time. And so when she was in that situation, it wasn't that she was more mature because she was taking it, it was that she had just been groomed up until that point. And so, like I said, later on, we connected again, and we had talked about, so this is how I kind of got into the work that I'm doing today too, is because we had talked about doing a radio show, and that kind of started, and we were able to do one. We wanted to have professionals on, but I realized pretty quickly that we didn't really mesh real well. So that was something that just didn't really take off. But it really got me to thinking that I knew that eventually I would do something around this kind of work, that I would either, you know, be out speaking about it or teaching or something. And what that had facilitated when I met up with my friend was me finding out about Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children. And so that was a curriculum that, and is still a curriculum that I do today, that teaches adults how to recognize, respond, and react responsibly when it comes to child abuse. So that's just kind of the quick story through there. But so then after going back to when I was 5, so after that time that happened with that boy, like I said, I never went over to my friend's house again. We would still play a little bit, but then she ended up moving away, moved out of state. And I didn't see her again or hear from her for, 30 more years. However, it wouldn't be necessarily the last time that I was abused. And there were cousins in my family who abused me when we were doing things like playing hide and seek. We were just playing regular kid games, and then they would find me and abuse me, and they were older. I wanted to go back. I'm sorry. I wanted to go back to also her cousins. I meant to say something else about her cousins. So my friend's cousins, I had said initially that they were teenagers. However, when we connected again 30 years later, I found out that the one that had me in the closet specifically was only 3 years older than me. And the other one was only 5 years older than me. So again, that's the perception of a child. I thought that they were so much more bigger and stronger and older because of the way that he was forcing himself on me. And then, of course, he was doing that in, most likely because that was what was being done to him. And so he was trying to see, what he could get away with on somebody younger. And that's the reality of abuse, really, is not that, everyone would be abused, who has been abused will abuse, but I think that there's definitely that thought, at some point, what are we learning as children being abused? That is all that we know. And it's kind of the same, kind of how I think when I was abused, continuing on, after that friend had done that, there were other instances, and I never understand that. We talk about that sometimes, about how on the NASCA radio show that I'm a part of now, that, how it seems to follow you for some reason. And I don't know if it's your it most likely is your vulnerability, I guess, because for some reason, yeah, it happens more than once. But so I need to take a quick break here.
No, yes, absolutely. And I was gonna say,
Take a drink.
but also I definitely want to take this opportunity to, let you know how much I appreciate you even sharing, all of this. Because the other thing is that I'm feeling real emotions as I'm hearing you speak, and I can tell, like, you yourself, like, still have some of them. And so that's also how the impact is pervasive. So, like, it's not just in the moment, like, it was a real experience. Like, you obviously, it was absolutely your lived experience, then, but that is how we know that our childhood impact us for many reasons, both positively and negatively.
Yeah.
Because I can literally feel like I was transported back, to your childhood. And I even thought about, times during mine where it wasn't, the best. And so, like, we do get put in those situations. But I absolutely want to highlight that with that, like you said, and especially given that you do advocate for children, you even mentioned when it first happened. I mean, absolutely. So starting with the zippers, I was already stunned. I'm like, I agree. I think I would find that extremely odd if I go somewhere and, maybe a part of me would also be like, wow, that's interesting that they're so comfortable, I guess. But I know I would have at least been off by it. I definitely would have been like, well, that's not normal in my household. So, like, why is that happening here? Like, is there some kind of norm that I'm not aware of? So it just, it would definitely, throw me off there. But I also think what was interesting was, especially in the closet, when you're mentioning how I'm sure you were stunned in general because you're like, well, I've never been put in this situation. So that, of course, is going to surprise anyone, even an adult. I mean, they're going to be like, well, this wasn't what I came here for. This wasn't what I expected to happen. So naturally, you're not going to have a prepared reaction to that because you didn't even think you were about to have that. You weren't even prepared for that situation. But I think what's incredible here is that when we're thinking about children, you didn't even have the context. You literally didn't even have that context to make sense of what was going on. But nor should you have to. Like, you're not supposed to have that context as a child. You should be able to play hide and seek freely. You should be able to hide in a closet freely because actually closets are a good hiding spot. It meant you were playing the game well. So it's like, what? Like, you should have actually been rewarded for that. Like, wow, the fact that you were actually, thinking well on, on your feet and doing that. It should not have been a place for danger to occur and for danger to have found you. So I think I totally agree with you there. And I just wanted to, like, first say that, for you as a child, but also for all of the children. That's why I agree with you that we should, as you mentioned in your bio, like, protect them, as much as we can, because unfortunately in that moment, you didn't even know you had to protect yourself. Like, that's the crazy part. So it's not just that you were in a situation where you needed to protect yourself, you didn't even know. So I just think that that's just the incredible situations that children find themselves in. And yes, I think children are tremendously resilient, and you were one of them. But I just think for your resilience to have been tested though in that way is just so, like, not fair to you and, like, incredibly unnecessary, but also just so, that's the tragedy behind it. I feel is that we put these children in situations that they shouldn't even have to be in. They should have, they should just be kids and they should be able to enjoy their childhood. So definitely that. So that was one. I definitely was, like, incredibly moved by that. But also, I think I also appreciate that you didn't mind sharing with us about, that it did happen again. And so I think too, that is something I mean, obviously not just in your case, but with so many others that can relate to this, that also occurs. And I think it is so easy to think that that must mean it's a failure on my part. I must be putting something out there. There must be a scarlet letter. Like, it must be something because I must be projecting something out into the world that people think it's okay to keep doing this to me. But instead, it's the abuser seeing a target. And yeah, I agree. It probably is the vulnerability, but I think they're also seeing that in that moment, that reaction. So, like, you were transported back to where you felt the first time you were abused, and that is where your mind went. But the abuser just sees somebody that, they're the person that doesn't inflict abuse. They're a person that has been abused before. So I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that and inflict abuse again. Like, that's what they see. So they're seeing, like, a completely different thing, and, like, it's a completely different lens. And so, you so happen to be the person there that they're able to then target. But because they were going to do it anyway. I mean, an abuser they're going to do it. It's just unfortunate that you might have, you happen to be the recipient at that time. So I feel like that's what I want. And I mean, I'm sure you've had time to also, process that, but viewers too, like, if you you ever feel yourself in that situation, please don't take that as an opportunity to then blame yourself and think like what you did wrong. No, you were just unfortunately the target available at the time for an abuser who was going to abuse and find a way to abuse someone, especially when it's a child. I mean, my goodness, there's like, who else is any more vulnerable when they're like, they want to play, they want to have fun. And usually, in your case too, what I think was also astonishing is that you mentioned that like differentiation in age, which appeared to be much more, much larger for you, it appeared to you that way.
Mm-hmm.
But also like, it's flattering too when an older kid takes interest in you. So there's that, but you usually want to please the older kids. If I'm like a little kid and there's older kids saying what to do, I'm usually going to want to go by what they say, because usually like they know what they're talking about, or because it might equal more perks, you know what I mean? Maybe I get more benefits, maybe I get to go do fun stuff that they're doing. So it's like there's just so many draws in there that make it, of course, incredibly difficult for anyone. So like it's not like it's an easy thing for you to want to then leave, you know what I mean? Or like, get away from or refuse. So I just think, that's what I so appreciate about your story, is that it gives us the opportunity to talk about all of those things. But you also started to mention that there is life on the other side. And so despite the fact that we're transparent to your childhood, that was then, and you have made it. But I'm curious, like, speaking of transitions, what helped you the most though? You know what I mean? Like go from being in that place, which unfortunately happened more than once, to now, being this advocate. What do you think helped you along your journey? And all of those things that, in the midst of you, transitioning and all those things.
Yeah. Well, I believe, and this is another part of my story that was coming up, really, is that I believe that my faith had a lot to do with it. My my mom was young and raising me, and so was my stepdad, who came into the picture, and I believe that they were at a point in their life where young 20-somethings usually are, without kids though. They just chose to party and have this lifestyle that put me in situations that weren't safe necessarily, because of the age that they were, I believe. Doesn't make it right. I'm not saying that that's right, because I would later find out too that that my dad did heroin until I was like 12 years old. And so that's long past when I initially was introduced to sex. However, then that played a part in my story as well, is that when I started to move into puberty, my stepdad sexually abused me as well. And so I remember right at the time that it started happening, he was getting ready to adopt us. And I just thought, this is really confusing. I mean, it was just really confusing to me that this man would want to adopt us and be my dad, but he's doing this to me. And I remember that it was several times, and there was one time I just started bursting into tears, and he looked at me and he goes, what's wrong? And I'm like, you're not supposed to be doing this. This isn't right. And after that, he quit. And I found out later on, he told me, because we have come to a place in our relationship now where he respects what I'm doing, and I respect the fact that he's remorseful and that he's never done it again. However, that doesn't make it right again either. But what I was going to say, then the question that you asked me, going back to that, was I had been going to church for several years because there was a church bus back when I was younger that my grandmother happened to find, and I have an aunt that's only 2 years older than me. So we kind of grew up more like sisters. And my grandma found this church that would come and pick us up on the school bus and take us to Sunday school. So at about 6 years old, I was being taken to Sunday school. And I just remember feeling so much at peace at the church. And it breaks my heart, hearing these stories of people who are abused in the church, because that was my safe place, and the place that I felt loved and the place that I learned about Jesus. And so I feel like that definitely played a huge part in my recovery, my forgiveness, of everybody that abused me. There's, and there's also, but there's also a line with that, because at 17, I was raped by somebody that I didn't know. So it's hard. Yes, I can forgive that man, but I've never been in the same room ever again with him. And so it's easier for me to maybe hang on to that anger a little bit. And I probably do at times hang on to that a little bit, more so than even my stepdad, who was, a major part of my life. And I think that also goes to show, that it doesn't really matter, it affects you in the same way, basically, but your willingness to forgive that other person, a lot of times, I think, depends on what your relationship is with them. So also, I know that I was groomed, basically, even after that happened to me with my dad, because my mom coddled and enabled him. And that's who she was, and that's who they were as a couple. And so, so then going forward from 12, but not quite to 17, we had moved, for a couple of years, we moved to Washington State and opened a family restaurant with some cousins and out there, and my mom's brother. And so when we were out there, and I started to, start an interest in dating boys, and I was starting to get a little rebellious. I was sneaking out at night and going to meet my boyfriend, and I was caught one night by my dad sneaking out of the house, and he pulled me back in the window and threw me through the wall. And again, I remember just sitting there going, what just happened? I mean, it just startled me to no end that this man is now throwing me through a wall. And I didn't have a whole lot of respect for him anyway. I was still holding this grudge of, from when he was 12. Yes, he had stopped, but, nothing else had happened. So at that night, in that instance, I decided to tell my mom. And so I remember sitting in the bed with my mom. We were sitting in her bed, and I was talking to her, and I told her what my dad had done. And that's when she looked at me and said, "Oh, it happens." And I don't remember the exact words either, how it happened, but I just remember kind of that phrase, "It happens." And I thought, oh, no, no, that's not going to happen. No. And I got, needless to say, I was very rebellious even more so after that point, and ended up running away to Florida with my boyfriend for a couple months. But, I didn't have any other context to go off of. I mean, here I am, pouring my heart out to my mom that this happened to me. And she just said it happened. Again, not that this is going to make it right by any means, but I now know, and my mom she's passed away about 18 years ago, but I now know that she was abused by her brother, who was 12 years older than her, from the time that she was a little bitty child. And in context to that also, I guess that lasted up into, even after she had me. And I don't know how that all works, but okay, so that's the whole generational thing that we hear about, right? You hear about people all the time and or families all the time, they've got this abuse going through. So my mom, because of the abuse that she had gone through as a child, and that was just in her mind, is that it happens. It's just going to happen. I guess women are just made to be abused. And so this is just going to happen. And she passed that on to me at 15. She told me that. And I made a choice then at that point, or not maybe right at that point, but within a few years when I got pregnant with my daughter, I had to make a choice to either say, okay, I'm going to continue to put my daughter in these situations that may not be healthy or safe, or I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to say, no, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect her. And that includes protecting her against my dad, And so I was very vocal about, protecting my daughter. And about the same time that I became pregnant with my daughter, my dad got throat cancer. And so he was, very scared. He was afraid. He didn't know what was going to happen. And that was the first time that he apologized to me. I wouldn't necessarily say that I agreed that it was a real sincere apology at that time, because I felt like maybe it was a little bit of my mom. It was coming from my mom too. And, just with the whole, everything that was going on in his life and stuff. So it wasn't until later, it wasn't actually until my mom died that he apologized to me, and it was sincere. And I accepted it as a sincere apology because he didn't have my mom behind him making him do it. And he had also probably my mom had been gone about 5 years or so. My dad showed up one Sunday at my church with me. And then I went through the process of him being baptized. I went through all the classes, the new Christian classes and everything with him. And so he knows very well right now what I'm doing, like I said, and it's funny to say this, that he is one of my biggest supporters and one of my biggest advocates for what I do. And so, that just goes to show you, I think, or in my mind, it shows me that there's a God out there that's so much bigger than our circumstances, and that, more than what we can even do, because I never could have imagined that I would be at this place, not only with my dad and being able to talk about child sexual abuse specifically with the man that sexually abused me, but I'm also able to go out and educate other adults. And that is part of my platform with the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children class, is educating other adults on how to, for one, so the first thing that we've got to teach adults is that you need to know the facts. You need to understand that 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the time they're 18. And then if you put that into context, you can sit in your Sunday school class or in your school classroom and look at your 20 kids and say, 2 of those children in my classroom are most likely being abused in some way, whether it's sexual or physical. And that we need to be aware of, if it's happening at home, how can we support that child so that the child can get the help that they need and minimize the opportunity. If it's within your, context of maybe your work environment, how do you minimize the opportunities within your work environment? Like we're talking, are there certain places, and in churches, this is huge. I think in churches, you've got all these little cubbies, that like you'll go around a corner and then there's a little cubby right off of the, underneath the stairs or whatever. Just being aware that those are not safe places. Those are, places that could be dangerous for children and or adults, or that might be in that situation. We also teach that you have to talk about this. You have to tell your child about body safety. This has to be a regular conversation in your household from the time that your children are little, because it shouldn't be a scary thing to protect your body. I mean, it's our right as people and as little children to protect your body. So we need to be teaching kids, that, for instance, if somebody comes up and unzips their pants, that's not appropriate. That's not something that they should be seeing, or that somebody else should be doing. And so you have to give them like those real, especially children, you have to give them those real concrete examples of, what is right and what is wrong, and talking openly to them. So one of the ways that I have been able to talk to my grandkids about body safety is I have some books on my shelf that just talk about, body safety, and they range from, a 3-year-old, how you talk to a 3-year-old, to how you talk to teenagers about it. And I have an almost 10-year-old granddaughter who has already, gone into all of the teenage books too. So she's very aware of what I do, and she's and then she knows too that I'm always here for her if I ever need it. So just always talking about it, and not making it a hard thing to talk about is going to be huge in helping to protect your children. And then also, the other part of it is acting responsibly. So if you have a child, for instance, you're not even in an environment, a work environment where you're around kids all the time, but you have children, and then your daughter's friend comes over and tells you, that something's going on with them. How you respond to is going to make a big difference, because that child has chosen you to share their secret with. And so they are hoping that you will help them. And so for you to freak out and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to go kill that person or whatever, is not going to help in any way. And a lot of times how you respond, and if you respond to a child in a negative way when they're telling you their story, they will change their story because they feel like maybe something they said wasn't right. And so then they'll change their story. So those are the things that I go out and I teach adults now is, how to protect children. And it's my passion now to be able to do this in my heart.
Man, and I definitely I can see that, and I think like you're just a great person to be able to do that, and it's definitely wonderful. But I also love what I'm hearing about. It's creating this culture of normalizing the conversations that we are afraid to have, and we think that we are doing our children a disservice by having the conversations, but it's completely the opposite. It's actually allowing them to have the language that they need, the tools that they need, and the resources, and really the context that you actually lacked when you were a child and didn't even know. So not only did you not know you were in danger, if somebody would have asked you, you might not even been able to even communicate about the danger because you weren't even sure how to even interpret what was going on, let alone express it and share it with someone else. So I think it's incredibly wonderful, and absolutely admirable that you're doing this work now, and also so necessary, because I definitely think we can't do that enough. And if we are going to protect our children, that is the way to do it. And I think that was also what was interesting hearing, though, this theme of protection, because when you said you ran away to Florida, with your boyfriend for a couple months, I mean, in my mind, I didn't blame you though, because I was just thinking when I was hearing you though, I get that. Yes, I get that it was rebellious, but or on paper anyway, but it's just that, but if you're supposed to be protected, if you have parents and they're supposed to protect you, but you're seeing vividly how that's not happening, it's going to be hard to convince someone this is where you should lay your head. And this is where, because again, that is part of what kids should be doing. Instead of getting abused, even though unfortunately it does happen, way too often. Children should, however, actually be enjoying their childhoods, like we mentioned. They should actually be feeling safe. They should actually be feeling secure. They should absolutely be protected. So when these things don't happen, yes, I think unfortunately what happens is you end up wanting to seek that security somewhere else. And so, at the time, if that was Florida for you, I mean, I just don't blame you, for wanting for that being where you win in your head. And it's actually unfortunate to me when I do hear the word rebellious like used a lot, because I feel like sometimes we say that, but I also work with children. And so I feel like, it's sometimes like it's probably, like I sometimes take issue with that because I'm like, no, but I can see. I mean, they feel like they're trying to get refuge that they don't have. And so they're seeking it elsewhere. And I also do think it is incredible that your dad, is now one of your main supporters. But like you said, I mean, I think you had every right to go through that journey first. And I'm glad you're okay with it and you're okay with him even being a supporter. But if you didn't and you were still struggling with that, nobody would blame you for that either, because that's not an easy thing. And what's interesting is that, I mean, we don't have to lie, you shared it with us. He did have a near death experience. So, I mean, I'm glad that like helped and everything, but like, I think that's what's like incredible is like, man, what about the people that don't have that? So, like, is it going to take them thinking they're going to die for them to finally realize they need to, so, and all that. And I do want to, emphasize that I'm glad you did receive an apology. I know there are a lot of viewers who are probably thinking, well, I haven't got mine. I'm still waiting on it, then and we want to acknowledge that, that not everybody can. I am glad that that happened here. And I, of course, wish that everybody could get that. But even some people who do, I mean, sometimes this is why it doesn't always provide the closure we need, because sometimes, we have to forgive ourselves sometimes, really like in the midst of all of this. And sometimes we've been carrying that pain so long, that's why we need to, sometimes when we do forgive others, even if it's without them giving us an apology, we're not doing it just for them. Sometimes we're doing it for ourselves. And actually, not sometimes, we should always be doing it for ourselves and like putting our own needs first. I was like, nope, we're gonna take that out. But agreed. And what I also wanted to highlight, I know you said this a while ago, but I also found fascinating that, speaking about your friend, because I mean, I wanted to give you credit and thank you so much for sharing your story, but obviously your friend was a very big part of your story also, your childhood friend and all that. But I also found fascinating was that when you were talking to your friend about it, the fact that they remembered it as a dream, I just think that that is just incredible, right? And that's another thing that I want to highlight, because speaking of protection, our minds try to protect us. And so clearly that was a protective factor that, their mind, was doing in that moment, was like, making them feel like, what, this is too much. So I'm going to make it, feel like for you that this is actually not your reality. And so it's going to, feel like a dream. And so it makes it a little easier to digest, because unfortunately that is a lot. That's a lot to process. That's a lot to take in. So I feel like, sometimes our mind helps us in those ways. But I also do love that for you, like you said, even though the church may not be the safe place for everyone, I'm glad you had some safe space. And for viewers too, we get that your safe space may not be church. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's, transporting yourself in your mind. Maybe it's mindfulness practices for you, whatever it may be. I'm just glad you had one. And I hope, others find whatever that safe space is for them, because we all deserve one. And it's not just as kids, it's also as adults. And in order for us to be better advocates for our children, we need to make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves. So I just love to hear it. I love to hear that you've, done all that you continue to work on all of that. And I am curious about that. So like, how is it now that in the midst of all this work and everything that you've been through, how do you currently take care of yourself in the midst of being this advocate for others, curriculum deliverer, all those wonderful things?
I'm still learning. I was such a mom. And that's what I wanted to always do, from the time I had my daughter at 19. I always wanted to be a mom, and I was, so it was hard because my son is 23 and I have a daughter who's 27 and then another daughter who's 35, but almost 35. But my 27-year-old and my 23-year-old basically left the house at the same time. And I went through some major depression, because it was like, basically my whole life was gone out of my house at one time. And that was all I ever did, was take care of them and, do their activities. And I loved doing that. And luckily my oldest daughter had a baby shortly right before they left. So I still, I started doing the grandma thing. And that's one thing that I can say for my mom, she was such a good grandma to my daughter, and she had two other ones before she passed away. But so I learned a lot of how to be a good grandma, and so I'm learning now to take care of myself by taking long bubble baths, by just being alone at times. I'm happy at times to just be alone. I'm right now. I am out at my daughter's house. She lives out in kind of the country, but they've got like rolling hills, and so they're beautiful, just beautiful scenery out here. And I come out here and I just stay several days. And they have horses, and go out and I'll play with the horses and play with the grandkids. And she's due. So they have two boys. They have a 10-year-old. He's my bonus grandson. And then she has a 2-year-old. And then she's expecting again in November. So I'm just kind of helping her out here too. It's kind of nice for her to have me out here to help her out. And so, yeah, I'm still learning. I think I'm still really learning how to take care of myself, but I'm getting there. And I'm, I probably have some major other life changes coming up, and I'm nervous about all of them, but I'm also excited because I know ultimately, I think it all goes back to my faith, that I know that God has a plan, and that, I may not have been walking in his plan for a while, but he's going to get me back on track, and, we're going to continue to make a difference for children. And this may sound funny too, but I think taking care of myself also is getting back into, teaching Sunday school and stuff. Now it sounds like I'm, not really getting, but I get so much out of that. I really do. I get a lot out of just being with the kiddos. And so I've missed that. So it's been a few years since I've been a Sunday school teacher, but that was, one of my dreams as a child. And, growing up and being sent to church that way, I just remember wanting to be that to somebody else. I want to be that Sunday school teacher to somebody else. And if this is the safe place for another child, then, I want to be that for them. So I enjoy that a lot too.
And I love that. And that's what, but I also love your answer. You know what I mean? Like, we should all always be learning, like new ways to take care of ourselves, new things that we can learn about ourselves, new ways we can develop ourselves, enhance. So I just think, like, I actually love to hear that. I don't think there was, of course, there's never a perfect answer to these things, but in general in life, there also aren't these like perfect recipes to like what we can do, and how we can properly do it. But it did sound, I do love, all the things that you mentioned. And it is wonderful to hear that the children that you took care of are now providing spaces for you to take care of you. So it's just so interesting how that also came together. And so, like, you're literally at your daughter's house, someone that you took care of, like you said, literally to the point where it pains you to stop taking care of her, so it's like, and now you're at her house as part of your self-care because she's in a place. So it's just like wonderful to hear that, that is how we can come full circle with some things. And I do want to also acknowledge also, I am sorry for your loss, despite I know your mother passed away before, but definitely that. But I think it's wonderful that you are honoring her legacy, and also that she was an incredible grandmother, and now you're also like occupying that kind of same position now for your children. So it's just just wonderful to hear that that is happening and that is going on. But that was actually, I also know that you said you were nervous somewhat about some things happening in the future, but it's funny because that was what I was going to ask, like, so what does the future hold? And I don't even think we talked about your book either. So like, I know at some point in your life you wrote a book, and so, if you want to also touch on that, I don't know if you also have books in your future, but like, I would love to hear about both the book, but also your future. Like, what else is next?
Yeah, and actually, it's what is written, and what I am a finalist for is, I guess it's called Spoken Words. So I didn't write the whole book. I wrote just my testimony in the book. And so the stories of Roaring Faith is, and volume 5 is the one that I'm in. But they've been doing it for several years. I think they're on volume 7 now. And it's something that they just continuously do. It's called Roaring Lambs, and that's their passion, and their ministry is to help people write their testimonies and write a book then too, if that's what they want to do. And it doesn't have to be about their testimonies, it could be about anything. But and so I am looking at writing a book someday. I'm just, yeah, I've never been much of a writer. And so it just, it's fascinating to me that I am even in this place with being a finalist for my spoken words, because it's not usually something that I, am a part of. Like I look at blogs and I'm like, I should do a blog, and then I don't. So it's not my passion is to do that. But I would love, like I said, I'm going to continue to do these classes. I am also an instructor for Darkness to Light. So I train the facilitators as well. And so that's something that's I'm very passionate about. And I do that a couple times a year usually. And getting into the churches, that was my first goal, is to really concentrate on the churches. It's been a little frustrating just because churches, a lot of times, I think they want to be friendly, they want to be open, they want to be trusting, and they don't want to rock the boat or anything unless something happens. And that's basically when I get a call, is when something happens, and then they want to educate their congregation or their staff on it afterwards. So, my hope is eventually we get through to churches, before things happen. And I do a lot of my trainings, honestly, at preschools. That's where I seem to get the biggest response. And not only with the staff, but a lot of times they'll have me come back again for the parents too. And so, I'm also finding that a lot of younger parents these days, like my kids' age, having kids, are interested in knowing how to protect their kids. They want to have these tools that are available. And why not? I mean, that's the smart way to parent, is to not have to reinvent the wheel. It's to help everybody else, use other people's ideas. So yeah, I think that's part of what my future looks like, is just continuing to do the classes, and yeah, we'll see what else God has planned.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
then you
was there another part
clarified.
of that question?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Well, no, because also, and I'm glad you clarified. So like that you're in it. My apologies. Like not necessarily there, but I'm glad that what's funny is the Freudian slip behind that. But meanwhile, there might be a book in you. So I think that's interesting that we kind of like almost, like prophesied something that might be in your future. So there is that. But I agree. I think it's, although you may not have always gotten those recognitions, I do love that you stepped outside your comfort zone and here you are, being a finalist and getting recognized for that. Because nonetheless, you do great work that is worth recognition. So I'm just glad that, you're here now getting recognized for that. And I do think that, whether you have the book in you or whether and even if the book ends up being just for you, you know what I mean? And maybe not for other audience, whatever it may be, like you said, that you're able to do whatever feels right for you and that and to you, and that you can do that, authentically. And, because that's also been a great part of your journey that I also love to hear, is that you've been just learning about how to do things that make sense to you, that are true to you, and can also still help others. And so, and I love that you've also been honoring your faith in the process, and doing all of those wonderful things. But I just also love that you continue to work in your passion. So like you said, whatever is not your passion, it's good to recognize those things also. And it's not really necessarily worth the energy if it's not something that you could be passionate about. But then meanwhile, there's other things that come naturally to you and you do very easily because you do love them and because they naturally are something that fuels your soul in that way. So it's just good to hear. And I feel like, I hope that, because of that, the classes do continue to, go well. And I also kind of agree with you more that instead of coming to, fight fires, it would be nice if you could come in before, and really, because you're speaking to the value of prevention. And so that's something else I've worked in that area as well. And I mean, I do still continue to like delve in that. I agree. Like there is such power in prevention, but helping others understand that can be difficult. So I agree that there are some stubborn
Right.
audiences, exactly. And it's funny because like you said, when there's not things happening, it almost does give this false facade that like, oh, we don't need it. See, we're good. We're fine. And it's like, no, I mean, first of all, it's probably already happening and the conversations are just not taking place. And so, you know, or people don't feel like because the conversations are taking place that they're safe to say anything. So that's one. But two, even if it's not good, let's keep that going with prevention work and make sure that people know why it should stay this kind of culture, even if that is the case. But unfortunately, we find that that is why you probably get caught afterwards because something was already brewing, or you know, they took advantage that there wasn't preventative efforts already there. So that's why I like kind of agree with you more. And I just hope that we just get more people that can understand that and then, you know, buy into that. So definitely.
Me too.
But with yeah, right.
Me
So
too.
with that being said, you know, like you mentioned, there's preschools that like are, you know, currently, however, on the other on the flip side of that, that you know do well with the, you know, reaching out and all those. But if there are others, so if there are others out there who also want to, you know, benefit for your classes or maybe just benefit from you or being able to learn more from you and all those wonderful things, how is it that individuals can connect with you, learn more about you and all those wonderful things?
Yeah, thank you. Um, so you could always, well, email's always easy, and it's info, you can do info at kimlakencreger.com. And then you can also find me on Facebook at Kim Lakin. And I have a, and I don't know why I'm mentioning this because I haven't done much on it lately, but I'm going to mention it anyway. But I have a page that I do, and it's on Facebook. It's called Soar on Eagle's Wings, and there's a few videos of me in there that talking about some of the struggles that I've been through. I've had 3 spine surgeries in 3 years, in the last 5 years, and so it's been yeah, that's been part of my journey too. I think God said, okay, you're going to rest for a little bit and figure this out. And so that's, you know, I had to deal with all of that. And, but I also do like late night emergency numbers. And so I'm pretty consistent of putting that on my Soar on Eagle's Wings page, as well as I'll go in and I'll put just some facts about how to keep children safe. Sometimes I'll go through kind of the 5 steps that Darkness to Light does, and things like that. So if you want to, you can find me there on Soar on Eagle's Wings. And then I'm also on Twitter, and I think it's Kim Lakin Creger on Twitter. And yeah, and Instagram. I guess I don't do a whole lot on Instagram either, but my posts from Facebook go out on there. So yeah, I would love to hear from you. If anybody, we are so lucky now we're able to do our classes online. So, you know, before the pandemic, we were pretty much just doing in person. You can go on to Darkness to Light, which is D2L.com, and you can look and find a class in your area. So like when I go out and do the preschools, you know, those are most of the time they're open to the other people out in the public. And so you can just sign up for one of those, or you can, you know, have me specifically do one for a group of people. So if anybody is in Colorado right now, and for the last few years, I've had some grant money from the Colorado Department of Education and Illuminate Colorado, which is another nonprofit here in Colorado. And so I'm able to go and do these classes in Colorado, well, in person or online in Colorado for free. So it doesn't cost anything. If you go onto Darkness to Light's website, you can do them. There's the whole 2-hour class on there that you can do for $10, or there's also little modulars on there that you can do, and they're I think like $5 a piece, and they're about a half an hour long. And so the nice thing about doing it on Darkness to Light's website is you can stop and start, you know, if you didn't have 2 hours all at once to do it. However, then what I like and I think is a lot more effective is having a group of people together, just because you bounce ideas off of each other and you have questions and things like that. So I enjoy the in-person ones, and even the Zoom is a little bit more like that too. But either way, I just really want to get it out there that this is a wonderful program, and all adults really need to take this class. I wish that we could mandatory it, make it mandatory for all new parents to take this class, and just be aware of what's going on
Absolutely.
in the world, because there's a lot.
Right. And I just feel like we can never, be aware enough, so like definitely like with that. So, ooh, y'all heard it. There is a way to be able to connect with Kim and to be able to learn, but also to take advantage of the classes, to like tap in, like get those consultations, whatever it is. I just want to encourage it, definitely, especially if anything resonated with you today, or if you're also thinking that, yeah, you could see the value in, building that awareness or bringing that to your organization or whatever it may be. Definitely want you to tap in. And so, was there anything else, Kim, that you want to be able to share with us, with anyone, before we officially wrap our time together?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. So
appreciate
thank you. With that, definitely thank you so very much. Learned so very much from you, and just literally it was such a wonderful pleasure to have you. So thank you.
Thank
And thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you.